Alright, so we were told for this programming assignment that we're to create a function with this code that we were given from our textbook. So the instructions are laid out there as to what we're to name it. I've highlighted it in red and the argument it's going to take. So let's go ahead and design this function. So we were given a name, my underscore sqrt. So we start our function definition with def as we are aware, and then we'll start typing the name of the function that we were given. So we're told to spell it this way. We're told it takes an argument called a. So arguments are put inside brackets. So we'll do that here. And then we have a colon at the end. And we'll press enter to start the body of the function. As you remember, it has a little indented space away from the margin there, as you can see. And then we're given the body of the function as to what it's supposed to be doing. So we don't really want to be trying to figure that out. We know that this is what the function is supposed to be calculating. So we're going to go ahead and put that in. All right. Python is complaining here. It says undefined name x. So we'll just need to make sure that we make the necessary adjustments to have that variable initialized at first. So when we take in the value of a here, we're actually doing a lot of things here with it because we want to make sure that, as the question says, we are creating our own estimate of a square root. So square root means something like if you have a number um, like 9 and you do the square root function, the square root is equal to 3, right? Because 3 times 3 gives you 9. So that's basically what we're trying to do in math, okay? But when we come to the Python program here, right, we'll need to make sure that we have the function used in such a way in that we can have the mathematical formula being applied that does square root. It involves a lot of a lot of calculations. Remember, you should have looked at this section here in the textbook. If you did not, please go ahead and do that, or else what I'm going to be doing going forward will not make sense for you. All right, so we're going to assign x with a value of a that we're taking in from the keyword. Again, this is based on how a manual square root is done with the calculations. So if you don't read the textbook, then you won't follow that part, right? We will return a value from this function because we don't want it just to make the calculations and then we don't get a value out from it, okay? So we have to return x. X is what is going to be returned as after the calculations are all finished. So we're going to put a return statement because otherwise if the program breaks here, we would have no final value to send back to the function to wherever the function is being called from. So we must use a return value. All right, because a is the original value that we're taking in, and it's going to return x. So we're going to actually test the function out before we move on to part 2. All right, so this is actually part 1. So let me just put a comment here. Returns our square root value. All right, you don't need to put this comment here. I'm just doing that to help you to see what it's doing here. Okay, let's test it out before we do anything else. So we know that 9, I'm just here testing with 9. All right, so we know that 9, um, expecting 3, 4, square root. All right, let me make some more space for that here. All right, so we already know what that is. Let's just test the function here and see what happens. So we're gonna print what my square root is going to return because we already know that's what we want to see. and we're sending the value argument 9. So let's go ahead and see what it prints. All right, so we get 3.0. So we can see that our square root function is working. You can trace through the values if you want. So we would have 9 being placed here, then it would be x would be equal to 9. So we'd have 9 plus 9 divided by 9 divided by 2, and we'll check to see if this is equal. We don't the mathematical formula of this, we don't really need to understand this. We just need to understand how to create the function from the code body that we're given. All right. So the function, our function my square root, it works. Okay. So we can get rid of that, and we can start part 2. All right. So part 2. All right. So now we'll actually have the square root that is built into the math library. So we'll need to import the math library to use that. And that means we didn't really need to create a my square root if we wanted to find a square root, but it was just an exercise on how we can create our own function, okay? So we'll put it at the top of the program just to make sure that we don't have any issues. So that this is called import math. But you just need to import it before you use it, okay? That's the important thing here. Um, yeah, it's imported but not used. We're gonna use it right here, so don't worry. So let's say, for example, that um, I wanted to do the same thing as the first function there. Let me print what the function math.sqrt will do. SQRT, and let me put 9 in it. All right, because it's already a function that's defined inside of import math, right? So let me print that and see what it gives us. As you can see, it gives us 3, so it gives us the same answer. If I use 16 just to make sure that it's actually doing it, it should give us 4. Let's test it and see. All right, it gives us 4. So we know it is working, okay? But we're not trying to use it like this. So let me just, that was just for testing. All right, so now we're going to actually do the function where we compare the square roots. So we're going to do printing of our square root function and printing of the math library square root function. So we're going to create our new function, and remember that we're given instructions as how we're to do our functions that we create, okay? So part 2 says we should name it test square root. So that's what we're going to call it, okay? So let's go ahead and call it that. So it's test underscore, let me just remind myself of how it's spelled, SQRT, yeah, SQRT. So if you don't use the names that are given, then you're gonna make yourself vulnerable to not getting the full mark, sorry. All right, so what we want to do is make sure that we have the value of our my square root function printed beside it, and we're going to do a calculation to find the difference. And difference means that we subtract. Okay, so once we're having anything that involves difference, it means to subtract. Okay. All right. But anyhow, let's continue with our program because we want to outline it first, and then we'll get the idea of actually how. Let me, sorry, get over to the. All right. So the first thing that we want to do here is make sure that we have a certain number of checks done. Okay. So in this case here, we're asked to print a table. Well, I left the table out, but um, the table has several loops for the for printing. Okay, so you'll have the access to the table there. So, anyways, let me just go ahead and just get right to it so that we can we can have it printed 25. We're going to print it 25 times. Okay, so we're just I'm just telling you that because I don't have the table there. All right, so the first thing we want to do is to get a variable that will control our loop. All right, you can call that variable anything at all that you want it to, right? But because we're working with a as the value that we are testing as the square root argument, let's use a. Okay, so a, we're going to start at 1, and we're using while loops. So we're going to say while a, because we want it to repeat as many times. Less than 26, this means it will be done 25 times. Okay. You can use a value, let's call this my num. We want it to be assigned to my square root. We just want to have the variable store what my square root does. Okay. My sqrt, and then we send the value of a. So it's going to be trying to do the square root of 1 the first time around. Okay. Oh, it's actually my underscore sqrt. I have to make sure I'm consistent with spelling it. All right. So that's a function call. And then we need one to store, um, I'll just call it other num equals, and we're going to use the math dot square root from the math library. And we're also going to have it calculate a. So remember, we're using the math function from import math. Okay, that's what that means. Oh yes, so it's just complaining that we never use it, but we're going to be using it shortly. So notice that there's a further indentation of the while loop from the function body. Okay, notice that the extra space there, even though you have the function body already indented, but notice that there's some extra indentation here. So that's be very careful of that because that defines where the while loop runs. Now we need to do printing each time the value of a changes. All right, so we'll start our print statement to give us the printing of how we should have the value of a to be outlined. So let's go ahead and print a little table. So we're going to have a equals, we want that to be printed in the line. We have put a comma so that we can print the variable and then put the a there. Then we're going to make a little table structure here. So you're going to use a quotation mark and you're going to use this as this straight slash symbol that you can find above the enter key on your keyboard. Remember, this is the text that's going to print the header. So we're going to say that underscore. So this is just a string that we're printing to the screen, okay? This is not the actual function being called. We're going to say equals, and then we're going to say my num. All right, let me expand the screen a little bit so that we can see everything in one line as much as possible. Let me just hide the Explorer pane there. Right, so we wanted to print my num at that point, okay? Then we also wanted to print what the math square root does, okay? So we're going to put another little marker there just to separate it. Okay, so we're going to say that the math dot square root, this is just a string here being printed again, as I've been saying before, is equal to, and then we're going to go outside the quotation mark and put a comma. Sorry, let me just see if I can get that off the screen so you can see better. Okay, I'll definitely have to go on the next line space because it can't hold everything in the same right. So we're going to put, what do we call our variable there? We called it other num. Okay. All right, so we're going to be printing other num. Then we have a comma after that to separate the variable. And then we're going to put a quotation mark so we can print some more text. And we're going to put another space divider line there. And we're now going to type the message difference, okay? So difference, diff is just short for difference, equals, all right? And then we're going to come here and we're going to use a formula just to give us the difference of what it is, right? So what is the difference, okay? The difference means that you have something subtracted from something. So if we go back to if go ahead, say the difference must be done, but difference and an absolute value, okay? So there's a special function for creating an absolute value, and it's available in the import math li in the math library that we imported. So that absolute function is started with abs, and so we've called abs, and then we need to do the difference now. Difference means you subtract, so it would be my num minus other num. All right, so that's what difference really means. Okay, so I need to make sure I have the correct number of brackets here. All right, okay, so this end bracket here is for the print function, so that's fine. All right, so we're fine. We're finished with that, the printing of that line. Then now we need to make sure that the loop eventually ends. So each time we're going to be adding 1 to the counter, so that eventually it will make this line here become false. All right, so we're going to increment it by saying a equals a plus 1. Put a comment here, right? This line helps to end the loop at 25. Helps to increment, sorry, you don't need to type this comment, I'm just giving you some notes here. To increment and end loop. Increment a and end the loop. All right, so now that we have the function created here called define test square root, let's go ahead and now actually do a demonstration of it. All right, so we're going to call the function. Let's go over to the left there. So let's call test underscore sqrt. All right, we don't need to send any arguments to it because it will be using the value of a that is looping here as the means of sending the argument to my square root here. So anyways, let's go and run it. We'll need to expand the output area so that we can see what is happening. So we're going to be doing that. And let's go ahead and run our code. All right, so there we can see it's printing the table. And right, so as far as we can tell here, that looks to be correct. Let's look at when we get to a number that we know we can predict. So 9, my square root 3.0, 3.0, 16, my square root is 4.0, 4.0. Okay, so that's the table being printed, all right? So the important thing for you to do is to try to trace through the function. And so what it does, this function here, absolute, is from the import math, as is math.sqrt. Just take a time and review it. Please watch the video a second time, even a third time, to make sure that you understand it, okay? And be sure to like and subscribe as well.